News Tonight with Betsy Singer.
We are live in Minneapolis, just outside the hotel where Vice President Mike Pence spoke earlier during a roundtable discussion where he spoke about support and funding for law enforcement. In this half hour, you will hear my one-on-one interview with the Vice President, as well as a live interview with Sheriff Kurt Freitag, who came from Freeborn County today to listen to what the Vice President had to say. But as we begin tonight, let's start with my interview with the Vice President. Vice President, listening to the business owners having lost so much during this roundtable, and tell me about when the president refused to give federal dollars for rebuilding after the riots here in Minnesota. A lot of people are critical about that piece to it, saying they needed the help, but because of the politics with our governor and the president, they didn't get the federal dollars to rebuild.
The stories of the families that were victimized in the wake of the killing of George Floyd here is just heart-wrenching. And to be here today to be able to express support for law enforcement, but also support for innocent business owners that literally lost everything. I mean, to literally go by Flora Westbrook's old salon and to see it decimated along with a building that her son had a business in. It's a reminder of just how important it is for us to get behind law enforcement. And as I told Flora as we traveled here, that we're going to continue to work in ways that will support the rebuilding in this community. We've been working with Congress on another recovery bill, and there's been much talk about coming alongside and providing support for people that have been impacted in the wake of the rioting and the looting that first occurred here in Minneapolis. So we'll work on that, but to see the support and really the love for Flora and for others that have been impacted pouring forth at this gathering today just reminded me of what a great state Minnesota is.
It's very sad how partisan it has become for our law enforcement as they go out every single day. I was talking with our sheriff who's here today, and he said, please ask the Vice President what they're going to do. We hear them talking about supporting law enforcement. Tell us how. So how can the federal government help them?
Well, we're not going to defund the police. Not now, not ever. As Joe Biden and his running mate talk about cutting funding or reimagining law enforcement, as you see the Minneapolis City Council vote unanimously to dismantle law enforcement, what President Trump announced shortly after the killing of George Floyd here in Minneapolis was we want to give more funding to law enforcement. In our first 3 years, we provided funding for the hiring of some 4,000 police officers through the COPS program. We created Operation Legend as we saw violence unfurling in cities across the country this summer with the rioting and the looting and the attacks on innocent civilians and law enforcement. And we've arrested more than 2,500 violent protesters and rioters in the last month alone. But it's that additional resources that we're absolutely committed to securing. I mean, President Trump and I worked with Senator Tim Scott to bring a bipartisan bill forward that would have provided more training dollars for law enforcement, but Democrats in the Senate blocked it. So we'll continue to drive forward, use the resources that we have and the executive authority the president has, but ultimately we need 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House, and we need Republicans and Democrats in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill who will work with us to support better public safety and support more jobs, better schools, and more public safety for our African-American neighbors and all those who live in our major cities.
Governor Walz called out the National Guard for your visit today.
Well, I would never question any decisions that put public safety first, but honestly, I'd like to see the governor pay more attention to innocent civilians and businesses that were impacted over the course of the last several months here in Minneapolis than being concerned about my peaceful visit here to this great city. But I have to tell you, to be here where all of this began this last summer, and to see the support for law enforcement that we saw today, to see the support and the deep concern in this community for those like Flora that were directly impacted by the rioting and the looting, I'm absolutely convinced that we're gonna carry forward a great message. We're gonna re-elect our president, and we're gonna see men and women elected all across this country who will back the blue and stand with our African American and minority neighbors for a better future.
Really quick, a bunch of ballots ended up in a Wisconsin ditch today. And Republicans are being accused of being the threat toward our election security this time around. What do you say to that?
Well, I just heard the story about the ballots that were found, and I know there'll be an investigation underway with the Postal Service. But President Trump and I are absolutely committed to protect the integrity of the vote for the November 3rd election. We fully support absentee voting by Americans. We have every confidence that the time-honored tradition of absentee balloting is secure. And whether people vote by absentee ballot or in person, we want to make sure that every vote counts. And that principle of one person, one vote that's at the heart of our democracy is preserved. That's why we're in courthouses around the country opposing what's called universal mail-in balloting, where literally you have states that are sending out ballots unsolicited to people on the voter list, whether or not people have been active or whether or not those people are even still living in the state. And the reality is that we're going to stand firm, protect the integrity of the vote. I have every confidence this will be thoroughly investigated, but it's absolutely essential that the American people have confidence in our election process. So voting in person or voting by absentee ballot, we'll make sure that system works, and we'll oppose any effort to erode the integrity of the vote.